and welcome again to another program of Searching for Answers. My name is Carolyn Thompson, and on my right...
I'm Gerald Winslow from Loma Linda University's Medical Center.
And John Jones, La Sierra University, the School of Religion.
John Brunt, the Azure Hills Adventist Church.
And Ivan Blazin, Loma Linda University School of Religion.
This evening, we're going to go through the book of John, but we're going to start with chapter 1, and it may take us a few programs to get through. But I think it's something that we're all going to appreciate. Now, of course, you know, we've all heard of John as John the Beloved. Well, let me tell you where he came from. According to what I read in Acts of the Apostles by Ellen White, he was not only proud, self-assertive, ambitious for honor, but impetuous, resentful under injury. He and his brothers were called sons of thunder, evil temper, the desire for revenge, the spirit of criticism were all in the beloved disciple. Now, why would Jesus choose John, and why would he be called John the Beloved? Anybody?
Well, he could change, right?
Well, yes, but it seems to me he had about 3 strikes against him to begin with. And they were known as the Sons of Thunder. They weren't pleasant to be around. They were fishermen. I'm sure that they were fairly wealthy and people worked under them. And they were impatient and loud.
Well, we do get some of those things in the New Testament, don't we? In
Yes,
the
we do.
Synoptic Gospels, we find that James and John, as well as their mother, try to come to Jesus and get him to have one of them on the right and one of them on the left.
That's
when
right.
comes into the kingdom. And there is a point where James and John would like to call down fire from heaven on some people. So.
Yes. I mean, they didn't change overnight, did they? It took a while. But doesn't that give all the rest of us some courage?
Yeah.
Because look what Jesus did for these people. And so if you get your Bibles, let's begin with the very first chapter of the book of John, called The Word Became Flesh. Do you want to read?
Well, this is taken here from the New Revised Standard Version.
Yes.
It's by no means the only version, but one that works well for the most part. And these are familiar words. We know them well. But in chapter 1, opening verse, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and that life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." A little bit philosophical, but a real echo of Genesis, isn't it?
It is. That's right.
Yes.
Ivan, can you give me an explanation of what he just read?
Books, long books have been written on this. But one thing, in the beginning was the Word.
Yes.
We have to be intrigued by the word word.
In the beginning was the Word.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, a word speaks.
Who'd that refer to?
Well, even before we get to
Okay.
who, a word speaks.
Okay.
A word reveals things. And so I think John is already signaling that, and it's almost like saying, in the beginning was the revelation of God. And then he's going to come down, of course, and identify that with Jesus. And I must say, as a definition of the word word, I do really like, and I mean this very much, the short definition that is given in Desire of Ages,
Okay.
where Ellen White says, he is God's thought made audible.
Oh, yes.
If you want to hear
Yes.
what God says, if you want to know what God thinks and what God purposes, then we must look to the Word to reveal that to us.
Those two ideas are actually within the Greek word itself, aren't they? not always in our word. We use the word in many different ways, but it can just mean that there was a word printed there. The Greeks would use another word for that, but this one meant the idea, first of all, of some kind of intelligent thought,
Yeah.
and then that thought being expressed. So it's not just a sound or a printed group of letters, it is the idea of intelligent thought being expressed, and
Yeah.
that's why I think God's thought made audible
Just
works
fits
so
it.
well.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Isn't that why it comes into English so many different ways in all the studies of things, right? All the biologies and even theology has the word in the second part of it.
The ology is taken from the Greek word logos, and so this is the word about life, about God, about the earth, or whatever it may be.
And John referred us to the book of Genesis a moment ago. And in Genesis, the thing you see right away is, and God said.
Yeah.
And that, the word and God said, this all goes together.
It is interesting that this is a dynamic idea. We humans, we tend to say, well, I promise I'll do it, but that hasn't done it yet, You still got to act on the promise. For God, speaking and acting seem to all be one deed somehow, don't they? And they express the idea of God taking the initiative. John, you've already mentioned the Greek notion of the idea of God as a logical thought, as ordered meaning, taking the initiative. There was an old religion that predates Christianity called Gnosticism that had that idea of God sparking off emanations from God's self, come into this world and reveal to us who we are really, and so forth. But for the Hebrew people, the Jews, it also carried the same meaning, because for the prophets, they regularly say, the word of the Lord came to me, the Davar Yahweh, the word of the Lord came to me. And there again you have the idea of God stepping in and taking the initiative. And so whether you're Jew or Greek reading this, you're going to get the idea of a dynamic God who acts, it seems to me.
And it seems to me, if this word is taken seriously, that we don't climb up to God and find God.
Yeah.
God moves down toward us and finds us. And of course, that'll be clear in verse 14, the Word became flesh. But this is very important. Our understanding of God really is based on revelation. It's not based on human philosophy, as important as human philosophy may be.
Do you think it just seems obvious that there's a strong, parallel between these verses and the beginning of Genesis.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's light and darkness. There's the sense of God's power and action. Is that deliberate? I mean, it seems like it's deliberate. It's very
Seems
intentional.
to me. Seems to yeah, without a doubt.
So according to John, if you're really going to understand Genesis, you understand it through Jesus Christ. And I think in that sense he is very deliberate. He's saying we understand the same one who came and revealed God to us as the one who was right there in the beginning. This is not just a Johnny-come-lately on the scene, but he was there in the beginning and is the active agent of creation.
And that revelation, according to the whole Gospel of John, of which this is an anticipation, has to do not only with words, but with profound deeds
Yeah.
in John. You spoke of the creation in the beginning, and God said and God did, and so on. Well, now we will see in the Gospel of John what God does. And where we see it is in the person of Jesus.
That's right.
May
Just-
I?
go ahead.
I just brought this along, and I don't want to put it in at the wrong spot, but I have here, I thought of this when I was thinking the first chapter of John. This is a book called Dreams of a Final Theory, and it's written by a scientist, a very famous contemporary physicist by the name of Stephen Weinberg. And I just read a couple of lines here. He's interested in nature, of course, and he says, will we find an interested God in the laws of nature? He means a God interested in us. He says all of our experience throughout the history of science has tended in the opposite direction toward a chilling impersonality in the laws of nature. Then just one last statement by him. He says he doesn't think we're going to find in these laws any special place for life or for intelligence, for values, for morality. And so, here it comes, we shall find no hint of any God who cares about such things. We may find these things elsewhere, but not in the laws of nature. And it was the elsewhere that got me. And I thought right away, here in the Gospel of John, I think we can find not a chilling impersonality, but a God who really cares. And of course, we'll be talking about God so loved the world that he gave, you know.
John Brunt.
It's interesting to me that in just these first 5 verses, we certainly get the idea how different this gospel is from the other 3 gospels that we call the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It starts out in a different way. We don't have anything like this in the other gospels. And we'll find all the way through this gospel that it's very different. In the other gospels, we have short snippets of stories. In Mark, you get 4 or 5 stories in one chapter, whereas John will often take a whole chapter or 2 on one incident. And you get different kinds of dialogues. In the Gospels, Jesus preaches and tells parables, but we will see a lot of dialogues where Jesus is in conversation with his opponents in the Gospel of John in ways that you don't really see in the other Gospels.
And no parables in John.
And no parables at all, that's
Is that right?
And very few miracles.
Well,
there are
That's right, just
7, basically.
and they're called signs. They're called signs. And so that we might cite in that regard, John 20, verse 30 and 31. Many other signs did Jesus, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you might believe that he is the Christ, and that by believing in him, you might have life in his name.
Jerry, would you start out with verse 1 in chapter 1 of the book of John and read down to about maybe including 10, okay?
All right. This is, excuse me, I'm struggling with my voice a little bit tonight, but I think I can do that. And this is, we're going to repeat then just the first little bit, and then we'll go on.
Since we had all the explanation, I thought we'd go back and
Just
read
a
it
little
now.
recap.
And which version are you?
Well, excuse me, I'm reading the same one you were reading,
yes,
the New Revised Standard Version. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. That's verse 10, but I might go on for just I think I've got to read just a little
go
bit,
ahead.
or it feels unfinished. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God.
Very good.
That's powerful stuff, isn't it? It's serious. This is not something scratched out on the back of an envelope some Saturday night when there was nothing good on television or during the commercial breaks. Yeah? This comes from an era when people cadenced what they had to say. There's a measured grandeur about this, isn't there? And we can see it in the English, even in the original, it's even more impressive. But if we can take a look at a text of this on the screen at the moment. Now, this is not the New Revised Standard Version. This is just a very ordinary sort of cobbled together translation that is very deliberately wooden, because I'm just trying to just kind of slavishly follow the Greek. But you'll notice that the words in red connect and connect and connect again. The ideas fold back upon themselves. A word at the end of one phrase is caught up, a kind of stitch word that's caught up at the beginning of the next phrase. Word and word, God, and then word rounds it off again, and God. And then verse 6, or rather verse 3, breaks that a little bit. It's kind of a parenthetical remark. And then with verse 4 and 5, we're back into that same pattern. In him was life. Life was light. Light shines in darkness. The darkness did not overcome it. And if we can skip on down to verses 10 and 11, which you've just read so well for us, Jerry, again, world and world, his own and his own. This is carefully thought out, measured, and crafted in ways that I think represent the best kind of expression we have in classical Greek philosophical thought. This is the equal of that in some way, isn't it?
This is why, if you don't mind me referring to a little history here, when I was teaching in the seminary, we would give people Greek exams to make sure that they knew, and then we would shuffle them off, depending on how well they did, into 3 different classes. If you did real well, you could read Hebrews. If you did quite well, you could read Romans. But if you didn't do quite that well, you would do John. And that was all right in terms of the Greek, because John's Greek is a little simpler. But in terms of the thought of the book, as you were indicating, John is such a profound meditation.
That's right.
So, you know, I'm glad that it has simple Greek, but it doesn't have simple ideas.
No, that's for sure.
It's the first gospel, indeed the first book of the Bible most missionaries translate into the native language of the host people wherever they're going. On the surface, it seems rather simple, but when you get into it, it's daunting and really, really thought-provoking, isn't it?
Okay, I'm going to begin with verse 14.
May I just say one other thing before we go on? Another feature of this gospel is that there are themes that come in, and some of them have already been introduced, and we're going to see them over and over and over again. Like this light and darkness and life. They'll go beneath the surface for a while, but then it'll come up again, and we'll see life again, and it'll go underneath the surface, and then it'll come up again. The theme of water is that way as well. We'll see it coming to the surface fairly often, and life. And so there's this tapestry of different themes, and it's amazing the way he weaves them together into a marvelous picture.
Do you want to go ahead and read starting verse 14?
You have to let me throw it. I just have
well, he's ahead of you.
Not the reading, but I just have to tell you about this. When I was in Croatia, at the time my father was ill in Croatia, and he died there. There was a young woman who was helping me with the language because I didn't know the language so well. And I wanted to give her a gift at the end. And so I said to her, well, do you have a Bible? And she said, no. And I said, well, she said, I've never read it. And I said, well, I'd like to get you a Bible. And I did. And she said, where shall I start reading? And I thought, well, the place to start reading was with John. So I opened it up. And folks, I just have to tell you this, I'm sorry, but it said, the Gospel of Ivan. That's what it says, because Ivan is John. I really enjoyed that.
I'm sure she appreciated it.
Yes.
All right, Jerry, your turn.
Well, I think it's already been mentioned, but John was John Brunt. We have really 3 Johns.
Yes, we do.
We have John, only he goes by Ivan, and John Brunt and John Jones. That's why I think we picked the Gospel of John, and high time that we did so too.
Yeah.
First, second, and third John.
That's it. But I think also the theme that's already here is the children of God.
Yeah.
Whose children are you? Are you the children of God? Are you the children of the evil one? That's going to come back in the future as well.
Now, can I read verse 14 on?
Yes, you're permitted.
May I have your permission? Okay. The Word, and that's capitalized, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testifies concerning him. He cries out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' From the fullness of his grace we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known." Now my question to you scholars, no man has ever seen God the Father? So is this a representative of God that can appear to man? Because if we saw God the Father, he is so powerful, we'd be destroyed? Or what do you take from reading that verse?
Well, of course, in this gospel, Jesus a couple of times says, "He that has seen me hath seen the Father."
Yeah.
I and my Father are one. So this, I think, is setting us up for that.
I think so too.
No one has ever seen God. That's what it says.
That's
right. Up to this point. I think that's what, but now the revelation comes in to give us something that we didn't have.
But God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known.
Yeah.
Well,
And do you
Go ahead.
realize how much that verse and that idea
Yeah.
that we will see over and over again in John about the way we know who the Father is through Jesus?
If you've seen me,
how
you've
much,
seen the Father.
Yeah, how much that goes against the grain
Yeah.
of what is in our bones. For years, I have asked students, tell me when you were growing up, your images of Jesus and your images of God the Father,
Yeah.
and how you felt about Jesus and how you felt about God the Father. And it never changed through all the 35 years I've taught. Students still say, when I was growing up, Jesus was the friendly figure. He was the one that I knew loved me,
Yeah.
and the one who called the little children to sit on his knee. God the Father, he's the scary one. He's the one who's out to get you.
Yeah.
Really?
He's
But I don't
the
believe
more
that.
harsh one. Well, certainly John didn't.
No.
But it's amazing that we have not let that message of John get through to us, at least in a way that we are able to get it through to our children.
Well, there's a verse in the New Testament says, you know, that I don't have to plead for you to the Father, for the Father himself loves you.
That will be in the
That's coming
Gospel of
up.
John.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you
coming up
know,
here.
we
All right.
have woodcuts from the Middle Ages, where the representation of God and Christ are made. And God is sort of off in the distance in awful, terrible wonder, and his face is very, very stern. Jesus is pictured as a little bit up closer, and his face is a little better and nicer, but the one who is altogether nice is Mary. See, and that's the way they conceived it, but John wants to alter this whole concept.
Yeah.
Well, it starts right in the first verse, doesn't it, Carolyn, where it just says the Word was God.
Yes,
Well,
that's right.
We know where that's headed.
That's
And
right.
since not all Christians believe that, some have had to change the translation. Some of you know the name of a translation that changes that to say the Word was a God,
Yes.
because the people who made that translation don't believe that Jesus is God.
Really?
And there's a misunderstanding of the nature of Greek there, the Greek language there. They
Yeah.
don't quite get that. It's wrong to say a God here.
Now,
Jerry, do you want to continue reading on?
all right. Well, we've finished the first 13 verses, and I think we're ready for verse 14. Is that right? Or did we?
There we go.
No, we
I
already
think
did.
it's
No, we're ready for
19.
19.
Yes.
I was having so much fun with those. I didn't want to go.
But I don't want us to leave verse 14 yet.
I anticipated that.
We can't leave. And the Word became flesh. If you're reading 1 John, it talks about who the Antichrist is.
Yes.
And that, as a matter of fact, in that very time in which John was writing, he says many antichrists have already appeared on the scene. Well, the one who's the Antichrist is the one that says that Christ did not come in the flesh. He didn't come in the flesh. We have a heresy at that time, Docetism. He may only have appeared to have flesh, but he couldn't have flesh. And this gospel and 1 John really are an answer, in part, to that particular position. God enters into history, and believe it or not, God enters into flesh, and believe it or not, God enters into the realm of death.
And that was unthinkable to Jews and Greeks alike. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we start really with revolutionary verses to open John.
Yes.
I've often had the same thought that we've already expressed, and that is that John seems like such simple words, little words, but the ideas are so immense.
That's
and
right.
I'll tell this one little story since we're nearing the end of the program, Carolyn.
All right.
I was sitting at lunch with John Brunt's daughter. He was with, John was there too. We were in Boston, I don't know if you remember, John. And she asked us, what are the most powerful words in the English language? And I don't know how you would answer that. What would you pick?
That's interesting.
I said, well, all the ones I can think of are really small. Like, I love you, or I hate you, or just two words in 3 letters, I do. Said in the right occasion. And John's got all these little words like I do, or the word love or light, but they come together in a way that probably is more powerful than, and maybe that's the reason we translate this first for so many people.
Well, that's right. And we would encourage our readers to read along with us as we continue next time. In the meantime, don't be discouraged with all the big words and things hard to understand, because these people know the answers. And I'm learning too. So be sure and join us next time. This is Carolyn Thompson for Searching for Answers.